So, without further ado, I would like to introduce our first speaker for the night. Her name is Jennifer Linde. She's the president of the Institute for Civil Dialogue, and she's a principal lecturer at the ASU Hugh Downs School of Human Communication. Please help me do a warm welcome for Jennifer Linde.
Thank you so much, and thanks to my ASU group, woo, and my Institute for Civil Dialogue group. We're all here, so thank you so much. I really appreciate this opportunity. I wrote some stuff down so I don't go longer than my allotted time. So I really appreciate this invitation to come and talk with you about the work that I'm doing, as well as the important topic of civility in politics. It's a challenging topic, and I respect the fact that we've all come here tonight to try and figure out what ways can we bring some civility to Arizona politics and potentially start some type of a movement. So for the last 18 years, almost 20 years, I've collaborated with my colleagues John Jeanette, who's here tonight, and Clark Olson, and we have developed strategies for having challenging conversations about topics that people usually run away from. The controversial, hot topics that people need to be talking about is the work that we've been doing at Arizona State University in the communication department at the Tempe campus, as well as in a nonprofit. And we started a nonprofit because we wanted to go out into the community to be able to take this grassroots movement to folks who really needed it. And we've found it to be great. So we can do research and teaching at the university. We can do that kind of labor that has really informed our work. But then we can go out, and we can go out to libraries, and we can hear what people are thinking and feeling, and it's been a benefit to us. So what I want to talk about a little bit is what we do, and then some of the procedures we've gone through, some of the things that have worked for us, and maybe give you some tips and some ideas about how to think about civil dialogue and how you might learn how to do it and apply it in situations in your life. I think the next few weeks are going to be kind of rough in Arizona, and we may need to remember some of these things. So, like I said, we're a grassroots organization, and we believe in communication. We come from the discipline of communication, and we understand civility at that level. And so we've created this framework for understanding civil dialogue. And so I want to talk you through that a little bit. It begins with an individual's capacity to engage in civil communication, and you don't start to understand how to be a civil communicator until you define civility. And defining civility is really tough because I think we all assume we have the same definition of it, and we don't. We don't, nor should we have the same definition of it. So the first thing we challenge people to do is to know what they mean when they say the word civility. We also encourage people to not conflate civility with the idea of manners or politeness, because they're very different things. One can have manners, there's nothing wrong with being polite, but that's not civility, because if democracy is going to succeed, we need civility. And civility is about being brave and honest and saying what you think in moments where it's really, really hard to say it, because you know you're going to be attacked, right? So civility is complicated. So the first thing you need to know how to do is to define it. And then, as an individual, you need to have some skills to be able to do it. And we start with communication. We talk about how we use language and how we are aware of our nonverbal communication and how we engage in listening. And we all do these things all the time. But if you want to be a civil communicator, you need to take some actions toward civil speech. And civil speech means that you say something without attacking and demonizing another person. You can hold an opinion, and you should hold an opinion, and you can say something, but if you spend all your time arguing against, labeling somebody else, and attacking somebody else, you're not really spending much time saying what you think. You are just spending all of your energy toward attacking. So civility and civil speech is about learning how to say, I feel this, I think this, and then sitting in the space of listening to somebody else, saying what they feel and think back. And so that part of it is even more challenging. It's amazing what a simple question can do to ask somebody, why do you think that? Or why do you feel that? And then you have to honestly listen to what they have to say. Because if you're not open to listening to it and you're only ready to attack what they're saying, then you're probably not going to get anywhere with that other person. So we teach about these individual skills of listening and speaking and how it is that we can kind of take care of ourselves and understand what we feel and think. And John and I have a really great story. We were up at NAU many years ago, and there was a student who was in the middle of a civil dialogue with us, and they talked all the way through the dialogue, and at the end of the dialogue, they said, I have no idea what I think. I realize all I've been doing is saying what my mother thinks. And I need to think about this, and maybe next time I will have something to say that I really feel and think. And so taking the time to know what you think, being brave enough to say it out loud is part of the work that we're doing. The other thing we do is we talk about using civility in groups, and that's moving. In our work, we do something called story scope, and that's when groups come together to tell personal stories in story circles. And the reason it's the work of civility is it's really interesting. I can argue against what you think or your opinion, but I can't really attack your story because your story is your story. And so if we spent more time in groups listening to one another's stories, we would connect with one another's humanity. And if we could connect with one another's humanity, we would be less likely to be lashing out at one another. So some of the work that we do at the Institute for Civil Dialogue is to bring people together, to tell their stories, and then to really examine topics through narrative. And it's amazing work. People come away feeling like they've been heard, and that what they had to say was listened to. And again, that's a big thing. Because sometimes one of the problems about trying to come to some space of feeling civil is that we never really feel like what we care about is being heard. So we do that work with storytelling. And then finally what we do is we do this community connection. We run a program called Civil Dialogue, and Civil Dialogue is a format that is at the heart of our nonprofit. Civil Dialogue is a public dialogue format. There are 5 chairs. People come to talk about a deliberately hot topic. We talk about abortion. We talk about taxes. We talk about guns on campus. We talk about marijuana. So the hotter the topic, the more likely we are to invite you to come to a civil dialogue to have a conversation. And it's a facilitated dialogue where people sit in 5 chairs and they take a position on a provocative statement. And everybody has an opportunity to say why they would agree with the statement or disagree with the statement. And then the audience of the dialogue is also able to contribute and talk about why they would support it or ask questions of the core dialogue participants. And the reason for 18 years these civil dialogues have been amazing in libraries. I went down to the Senate and did one. We've been all over the world, all over this country. The reason they work so well is that you are being asked to hold space with somebody else's opinion in a format that's asking you to be respectful, to not interrupt, and to take the time to really take in another idea. And in that circle, when you're sitting, it's transformative because all of a sudden it's not just about you, it's about can we put the topic in the middle of the dialogue and really focus on that and stop labeling one another and stop interrupting one another. So the format of civil dialogue is the work we do. We go into schools and the libraries and all over the city. And I'm happy to talk more about civil dialogue, about story scope, the work that I'm doing, because I feel very passionately about it, as part of my teaching and research at ASU, but also about community work. One last thing, let me tell you one short story before I hop off the stage, and that is Guns on Campus at ASU has been an ongoing dialogue. I've probably facilitated 20 dialogues. And one of the statements that we use frequently is we ask people to say whether they agree, disagree, are neutral or undecided about the statement, I feel safer with guns on campus. And people run to those anchor chairs of agree strongly and disagree strongly. And then those two folks sit across from each other and talk about it. But what is so valuable about that dialogue is that they talk about why they feel safe. I want to feel safe when I go to school. I want to go to school and feel safe without a gun. I want to be in my office and feel safe with a gun. I want to be in my office and not worry that somebody has a gun. And it's the humanity of talking about their safety that takes us through the dialogue. And I would hope that we would be able to have our politicians and our leaders listen to those dialogues and listen to how people feel about those issues from that perspective, because I think we could go pretty far. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you, Jennifer. We continue on today. Our next speaker is Executive Vice President for Greater Phoenix Leadership. Please help me welcome Heather Carter.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks for the round of applause. I've been told I'm supposed to tell some jokes, and now that's like a pretty high bar. Well, thank you so much for having me here tonight, and I really appreciate the opportunity to have these conversations with you, because we absolutely have to figure out a way that we can talk with people that we disagree with. And if we in this room can't figure that out, this state and this country is in a world of hurt. So preparing for this and looking at the invitation, it said to share my story with you, and thank you for queuing that up. You know, you can't argue with my story, so now nobody can argue with me what I'm about ready to share with you. Many of you know me as a former lawmaker. I served in the Arizona legislature for 10 years in the Republican majority. It was one of the greatest honors of my life. I was talking with Mayor Giles. He said, "Do you miss being in an elected office?" And I do. I miss being able to be that rational voice down at the Capitol and vote in support of, and sometimes against, right, Rebecca, some crazy legislation. But I will tell you, you do not have to be in elected office to make a difference. And you showing up here tonight shows that you care enough to make a difference in Arizona, and that means that we have to figure out a way to talk to each other about issues. So I'll share a story with you publicly here tonight that I'm not sure I've shared publicly. So Mike, this can make it onto the news one evening if people care at all. I was a Republican for 35 years. I moved to Arizona in 1988. I registered my car. I registered for classes at ASU, and I registered to vote as a Republican. I never questioned what that meant to me, to my family. I shared my political views with my friends back at ASU. I had friends that were very involved with the Ross Perot campaign. Do you remember that? Remember that election? And so, it was just always a part of who I was. And then I served in the legislature, and sometimes I didn't get the memo of things that we were supposed to be supporting. As a lifelong Republican, I said, I can't believe that this aligns with what we have said to our voters on what some of our values were. So after a long, 10 years in the legislature, and 2 years after that, I tried to stay in the party, tried to work it from the inside, recruited my friends to be precinct committeemen, showed up at those meetings. This meeting tonight is way more fun. Show of hands, how many of you have ever been to a Republican precinct committeeman meeting? Okay, good. About a quarter of the room. Not necessarily some of the fun places to be, right? Well, I decided on statehood day of this year to drop my registration and become an independent. I tweeted out a little message. It was a subtweet. Anybody have teenagers? You know what a subtweet is? It's like where you're really saying a message, but only certain people know what you're trying to say. Well, nobody understood what I was saying on that tweet. I basically said, "Happy birthday, Arizona, #independent." And I've never looked back. It's actually liberating, I gotta tell you, right? It is absolutely liberating. And then when you look at Arizona, almost a third of our voters are independent. And when we wanna really focus on having a civil conversation, I think we should really look to our independent voters, because they're independent for a reason. And we really need to take time to understand why people have decided to not register with a party. What's happening in our political discourse that doesn't allow perhaps some civil conversations? I, voted in 2013 for Medicaid restoration. Mike, we were just talking about that's probably the last time we saw each other in person. I think I even probably went on your show. Well, I was censured. I was censured by the party. I was censured, I think, Mayor Giles, you've been censured. I was censured back with John McCain. So I take that as a badge of honor, right? It was the same night that he was censured in my LD, that I was censured in my LD. Fast forward to yesterday. In the mail, got my ballot. Thank you, Stephen. Got my ballot. And I got the yellow ticket. Do you guys know what the infamous yellow ticket is? Okay, well, or the golden ticket. See, I don't even know the name of it. Even better. The golden ticket that the Republican Party typically tapes to your garage doors to tell you who to vote for as a Republican, but this time they mailed it out. And I just thought to myself, what a world we live in. The party that censured me, that didn't want my vote in the legislature, now wants my vote in the general election. Well, guess what? They're not getting it. And so where we find ourselves today is that having this conversation with your friends, your family, your neighbor is really, really difficult. And I give a speech, actually most of them have been virtual the last 2 years. I think these are one of the few public speeches that we've been able to do back in person. And I talk to people about it's important for each one of us to take personal responsibility for our elected officials because they got there by the voters. And so if you don't like what the elected officials are doing, you need to look in the mirror and say, did you show up at the polls and cast your vote for the person that you think will do the best job? And when I encourage them to talk to their friends, their neighbors, their family, we're coming into the holiday season, what's the one thing they all tell me? Guess, what do you guys think? If I said to you, talk to your neighbor about this election, what are they going to say? I don't want to talk to them about politics. We're going to talk about anything but politics and religion. And I'm here to tell you tonight, if you take anything away from my speech, it is time for you to talk about politics. It is time for each one of us to push back against some of the lies that people are spreading about our elections. If you differ on a policy issue, let's just take elections, for example. We can debate on whether or not there should be mail-in voting. I think there should. There are candidates that think there shouldn't. Let's have a civil debate about that, but to not talk about it is dangerous. Because if people only talk to each other when they agree with each other, how are we supposed to come together and solve some of the most important political and policy challenges we face as a country? Water, education, healthcare, and a long litany of other issues. And so if we can't figure out, those of us in this room, how to talk to our friends and our neighbors about politics, how do we expect others to do? So I'm here tonight to learn just as much as I am here to share that with you. But I challenge each one of you. I always assign homework. Some of you that have heard me speak, Julie, you know I do this. I always assign homework. Your homework tonight is to go and find 5 other Arizonans and ask them, who are you voting for in this election? And I want you to engage in a civil conversation, even if they hold a different opinion than you. And by building this person by person by person by person, hopefully we can do this at the state level and at the national level. And by the way, little plug for Stephen Richard, if you have any questions about the elections office, just email him. He will tell you. No bamboo paper, Sharpie gate, and no, the computers are not connected to the internet. Like, those are the questions, thank you, Stephen, those are the questions that your neighbors may ask about this election. And if you don't talk about politics, how are you going to be able to ensure that they believe that this election is safe, it is secure, and it is accessible? So you have a homework tonight. How many people are you going to talk to? 5. And then report back. Tag me on Twitter, whatever. But I am just so grateful for the honor to come here tonight, and I can't wait to hear the rest of the speakers. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Heather. How is everybody doing? Feeling good? The weather is amazing tonight. One of the other things that we got going for us besides the weather is this amazing space. Greenwood not only makes great beer, yes, give it up for Greenwood. Greenwood not only makes great beer, and if you haven't tried it, the Rosemary IPA is my favorite. but they also make conversation. They have a thing called the Power of the Purposeful Pint. And I just want to bring up Lisa Greenwood. She's in the family of the Greenwoods to tell us about that for just a couple minutes and tell us where we're at today.
Sure, thank you. First off, thank you all for being here tonight, and thank you all especially for drinking our beer. Cheers. I'm Lisa Greenwood. Typically, it's my sister Megan who's up here giving the little thank you speech. Megan is actually the owner and the founder of Greenwood Brewing, but she had a baby a month ago. Yay! So I'm now an aunt, and I am now taking over her duties for Arizona Talks. So like Carlos mentioned, here at Greenwood, you'll notice there aren't any TVs. We kind of have these intimate spaces. This is all done with intention, with kind of our tagline of the power of the purposeful pint. So having Arizona Talks here tonight is exactly what this space was built for. Engaging in civil dialogue, hearing different people's perspectives, and just engaging. Maybe a craft beer gets you a little more honest, gets your cheeks a little rosier, maybe gets the conversation flowing a little bit better. But that is what this space was intended for, especially being in downtown Phoenix, where there's such a melting pot of people. So I think that's kind of covering that. I just wanted to say thank you so much for being here. And then also a shameless plug that if you do enjoy this space, we are booking holiday parties. So you can check out on our website. But yes, please enjoy the rest of the night. Thank you so much for being here. And if you have any questions, I'll be around after to answer any of that for you. Cheers.
Thank you so much, Lisa. Wonderful. Well, it is my pleasure to announce the next speaker. He is the mayor of Mesa. His name is John Giles. Please help me welcome the mayor of Mesa, John Giles. Whoop, whoop.
Thank you. The mayor of Mesa, I think, is typically found on Roosevelt Row in a bar, so no big news there tonight, is there? After listening to Heather, I kind of feel like I'm in group therapy tonight, right? So hi, I'm John. I'm a Republican. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. I feel like I'm going to have to pay you all like a copay for the therapy session tonight. So please let me, if you've got any helpful hints, I'm here more for me than I am for you. I ran for a nonpartisan office as mayor of my hometown for a very specific reason, because I'm not a fan of partisan politics, for probably all the reasons that you get turned off by it. But I love my hometown, and I was really thrilled with the idea that, like Heather was saying, the impactfulness that you can have as an elected official really, it's hard to rival that. And so I've just loved the last 8 years and the opportunity I've had to be impactful in my hometown in a very nonpartisan way. And so but lately I've attracted a lot of attention. And that's, in spite of the fact that I'm mayor, that's really not something that I crave, frankly. And the reason that has been the case is because I am a registered Republican, and a month or two ago, I decided to film a television commercial for endorsing a candidate from outside of my party. Later, another television commercial endorsing an initiative to support Dreamers getting an equal shot at tuition in Arizona. This was not the reaction that I got. Electronically, I was really, I guess I was kind of dumb, because I dramatically underestimated the response that I was going to get from doing those two things. And here's what it was. Electronically, it's literally 10 to 1. People hate me for the unforgivable sin of endorsing someone who's not of your political persuasion. But I have to tell you that in the real world, with real people, 10 to 1, just the opposite, right? I mean, real people that I don't know, strangers, stop me in the airport and they say, "I'm sorry, you look like you're in a hurry, but I have to tell you thank you for giving voice to this weird notion that, party it might, ought to come second to what's in the best interest of your community. So I don't regret making the choices to do what I've done at all. But I do have, I think people have very legitimately, I think a lot of the criticism I've gotten is funny, right? It's not illegitimate at all. But people have very fairly looked at me and said, okay, why are you still a Republican? If you feel that way, explain to me why you have not left the party. And that is a really good question, isn't it? And my answer to that question is I feel like I have an obligation as an elected official to model good behavior, absolutely, there have been countless times over the last several months where I've said, okay, that's it. I'm emailing, Mr. Rickard right now and withdrawing my association. But I got to tell you, I am very grateful that I haven't done that. And that's because I'm not saying I will never do that, but I'm saying that right now I feel like I'm in a position that I can be impactful, right? And that's the whole thing that drew me to elected office in the first place. And so I'm really kind of enjoying this opportunity to irritate people because I think it's going to motivate positive change in our community. Like Heather, I, as a young person, well, even not that young a person, I was very proud of my association with the Republican Party. I mean, I was an intern for Congressman John McCain, to let you know how old I am. And there were several people in the good old Republican Party that to this day, Grant Woods and others that have been mentors and examples to me that, and I'll never apologize to the people who want to put a knife in the heart of the McCain machine. So it just saddens me deeply that this party that in the past has stood for respect and integrity and honesty, and I mean even the Democratic, even the folks in the Democratic Party would always say, I respected the individuals, I respected the integrity of that organization. I'm sad to say we can't say that anymore. So I'm not here to depress you, but I wanted to kind of set the stage, lower your joy level just a little bit to let you know that these are very important and challenging times, aren't they? And we all have to respond in our own ways. My way of responding is staying in the Republican Party and seeing what damage I can do. But I say that, again, my hope and prayer is that I will be, me and an army of people yet to be step forward, will have some impact. I don't mean to make it sound like I'm some kind of martyr. I'm having fun, and we'll see where this goes. But now that I've thoroughly depressed you, with thinking that we're all in this unwinnable culture war, I want to share a positive experience with you, okay? So again, I've had this wonderful experience of being the mayor of my hometown for the last 8 years. I was elected in 2014, and you all remember what was the big contentious issue back in 2014. If you're watching Fox News or CNN, they weren't talking about Donald Trump, they weren't talking about other things, they were talking about non-discrimination laws. Remember, like North Carolina was being sanctioned, and Houston had a referendum against the bathroom law, and I mean that's just literally, and HRC and others were really putting a lot of pressure on local governments and on state organizations to pass non-discrimination laws, primarily identified to support and the LGBTQ rights in local and state government. So that's what was on the plate when I arrived on the scene as a mayor, and I had just a personal experience that kind of an epiphany. For those of you who are religious, kind of a personal revelatory experience with that convinced me that this is the right thing to do, and this is the right thing to do for my city. Well, as you know, Mesa is notoriously conservative. And this topic was very it was problematic even in Democratic Phoenix. Phoenix adopted an ordinance in 2013, but it was a very contentious process, and it was, a day-long city council meeting with a lot of anger, and it wasn't done easily. And the same is true in the other more liberal cities in Arizona, Flagstaff, and Tucson. It was not an easy sledding. But I thought, it's the right thing to do. We're gonna forge ahead in Mesa. Well, ultimately, it was much more difficult than I anticipated, and we started and we stopped and we amended and we, it was a very involved process, and ultimately it really required, and I'm glad it wasn't easy, right? Because the really good things happened from this very difficult process that we had to go through in Mesa, and what ended up is these wonderful coalitions that between the LGBTQ community and the faith community, because those were the sides that had to sing Kumbaya for this thing to sail in Mesa. And ultimately it did. And so in March 1st, I carry around with me this pen. It says, I didn't plan on showing you this, Mesa, Arizona, NDO, March 1st, 2021. Because this is the pen that I used to sign that ordinance. And I gave this to some of the groups that were involved in it. So that happened, and that wasn't the end of the story, but because we were challenged, we had the legal, we had an initiative, we beat that, and because Mesa fell as that domino, Scottsdale, Glendale, Tolleson, Chandler's about to go. There's about 2 million more people in Maricopa County that have that protection that I really don't think would have happened had we chosen to not take that on. And so that's a big deal, but then, and this is the inspiring part, okay? I depressed you earlier. I'm trying to make up for that. This legislative session, I went to the Capitol for a press conference because the LGBTQ community and the faith community had come together and persuaded the leadership of the House to give a hearing to a statewide non-discrimination law. And I remember standing there with very conservative LDS church leaders, the LGBTQ community, legislators, who were all singing from the same sheet of music. They were all endorsing the same piece of legislation. And I thought back to the year 2008 when the faith community pulled out every resource they could to amend the state constitution to make same-sex marriage illegal. And those two organizations, the faith community and the LGBT community, you couldn't describe it as anything but fierce enemies. And I just remember thinking, how does this happen? How do you go from being absolute enemies to now linking arms, pushing the same piece of legislation? And it brought a tear to my eye. Obviously, I cry easily, but I want you to, that's my takeaway for you, is that's the world that we live in, really. The real world, the world where people stop me and say thank you for doing that commercial. The world where the LGBTQ community and the religious conservative community come together with the same piece of legislation. So it's easy to be discouraged. But there is a lot for us to do. As soon as this election is over, I think we all need to get rallying around the issue of nonpartisan primary elections. I was talking to some Republicans from Colorado just a week ago, and they said, "You guys are crazy in Arizona. What's going on?" And they said, in our state, the MAGA candidates all in the Republican primary lost by 10 or 20 points. And the reason is because in Arizona, we make it extremely difficult for independents to participate in partisan primaries. We need to change that. I think that's the systemic cure that we have to make for this state to go from where we are to where we're going. So thank you. Remember, the world we live in is that world that we're nice people, help each other, and that we can expect to make good things happen. And again, I appreciate being included in the show tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Giles. Thank you all so much for showing up tonight. My name is Jared. I am the programs director here at Arizona Talks. Thank you. Before I introduce our next speaker, I want to take a minute to tell you in part what makes Arizona Talks unique and what I believe a vital component to bringing more sincerity, integrity, and frankly, more sanity to our political discourse. There's a growing number of groups getting into civil dialogue and civil discourse space, which is great. Civility needs as much help as it can get right now in our society. We need as many groups and organizations as we can to tackle this issue. As someone who helps run an organization where one of the main themes is civil discourse, I've had the pleasure of attending quite a few other organizations' meetings and events. One of the things I have noticed is the majority of these events are coming from centrist or moderate views in which they express concern about what they see as extremist wings gaining too much power within the two-party system. Their goal often comes across as wanting to bring the wings to the middle, which, if you consider yourself a moderate or a centrist, is a pretty good deal, essentially asking those on the wings to join you. A possible flaw in this is that historically, the middle hasn't always been innately right, at least not about everything. Also, it puts the impetus for civility on moderates. This is where I believe Arizona Talks' vision is unique. We believe the idea that civility can and should come from all over the spectrum. Whether you consider yourself a conservative, a moderate, a liberal, or anything in between or outside of those, it is on every one of us to do a better job treating our fellow neighbors and citizens with civility and dignity. Here at Arizona Talks, we aren't necessarily attempting to bring people to the center. We are merely trying to get everyone to the table. And as our name implies, Arizona Talks, that wasn't written down. We believe that talking is action. You're already doing part by being here this evening. I invite you to join us in our mission to promote conversations like the one we're having tonight. You can do that by becoming a member. It's only $25 a year. You can also do that by visiting our website at arizonatalks.org to make a donation. There's also a bunch of papers that have QR codes if you need to be led to that. Thank you again for being here. Now I should go ahead and get to introducing our next speaker. Our next speaker is the Editorial Page Senior Director at the Arizona Republic. Please welcome Elvia Diaz.
Yeah, thank you. I'm so glad I was able to hear some of you first because I'm so pessimistic that now I feel better. I really do. So thank you. Thank you for doing that. So Elvia Diaz, I'm new to this job as head of the editorial board, but I'm not new to Arizona. So I've been here since 1999, and I briefly want to talk about what I faced when I got here before I talk about something else. Yes, I'm going to talk about something else stupid. So when I got here, I came from New Mexico. I covered the Albuquerque Journal. If you know anything about New Mexico, it's predominantly Hispanic. So I came here to cover local politics, first MP, then Phoenix City Hall, then the state legislature. When I got to Phoenix City Hall, I was covering light rail. So immediately, I started getting a lot of emails about the Mexican reporter. And I'm like, I'm covering light rail. You know, what does that have to do with being Mexican, right? And so it was a message after a message and after a message. And some of those messages were, which I saved for a class a while back then. It was, I would rather be in a plane with a terrorist than a Mexican like you. So that stuck with me. I mean, you would rather be with a terrorist, with a Mexican like me. So I kept ignoring that. And then remember during the anthrax scare back in the, I can't even remember what year that was. Well, I was the lucky one to get the envelope. And actually came from prison. It had powder, but when I opened it, it said, "You're going to die F Mexican." So imagine then all this powder in front of me. So of course I freaked out, right? So the editor called the the firefighters and what have you. Back then, I didn't think we made a big deal. I don't even think we even reported it. So I'm telling you this. Oh, and I just wanted to read, just because when I was listening to you guys, I quickly went to my email just to pick the, whatever, the first one. Because I tell people, if you really want to know how nasty people are, you're welcome to come to my inbox, which I get every single day. So I just picked this one from Linda, at least Linda Shaw, so at least she actually put her name. So this is in reaction to Liz Chegney. So she says, Liz is a stupid bitch just like you. The only difference is that you are an ignorant liberal beaner. So that word, wetback, beaner, that's all over my my inbox since 1999 when I got here. So I'm not telling you to feel sorry for me. I'm telling you to tell you that that kind of racism, that kind of rhetoric has been going on forever. Some of us have felt it. Some of us have been silent, and we shouldn't have. But it's always been there. The only thing that Trump did, and the MAGA people, is to give permission to everyone else to say it to my face. And you know what? I actually appreciate that. I actually appreciate Linda Shaw, because she has the guts to tell me Mexican beaner with an email. And I actually appreciate the MAGA people because we know exactly who they are. Instead of, you can't fight an enemy that you don't know, that you even know that it exists. So anyway, so that's my civility for you. I actually want to talk about something else as well. But believe me, it has to do with that. So I'm showcasing the editorial, the front page editorial that we wrote and actually published, because one, it's rare that we actually do a print front page editorial. So if you get the paper, the actual paper, thank you for that. If you don't, please do. Otherwise, you can read the editorial on azcentral.com. But what I really want to talk about today is the headline, Democracy Under Attack, which I'm pretty sure you're going to talk about that, Stephen. So in this editorial, what we did, we took every claim of election fraud one by one, and we told readers exactly how it was banked, how it was essentially told it was a lie, right? One by one, by county officials, Republican county officials, by reporters, by the same audit, the so-called audit, by everyone. So one by one, pretty lengthy. And so this is what I'm getting at. The reaction that I got from this editorial, you can imagine, it was all over the place. But there are two things that people were angry, of course, but there are, and others were happy. But let me go back to here a little bit, because two questions kept coming back to me, a lot. One was, which I think it goes to what the work that you do. One, okay, so great. Democracy and what else? And at first I was like, what are you talking about? Democracy is it, right? And then subsequent questions, okay, so I get it, democracy is under attack. But tell me exactly how my life is going to change. Tell me how my life is going to change after the vote. So that's what I briefly want to talk to you about today. That's my biggest concern, that you and I know that democracy is under attack, and we know what that means. But are we really explaining that to voters? I'm getting tons of questions about this. And so I fear that we're not. And when we don't do it, then the democracy under attack becomes a political slogan. And we know it is not a political slogan, but we're failing to explain to those people. And I understand why from both ends, because a lot of these people are desperate, because we're not addressing, especially some politicians from both sides, we're not addressing their basic needs, because it is very, very difficult to think about democracy when you're hungry. It's very difficult to think about fighting democracy when you are sleeping on the streets. I just saw a few when I was walking here. It is very difficult to think about democracy when you can't go to the doctor because you don't have health insurance, when the only care you have is at the emergency room. It's very difficult to talk about democracy. And I fear that we're not explaining that to them. To you, yes. You know what that is. To the people that email me being really, really angry, they probably do that as well. So I think that in part, that's why MAGA folks are so keen on that. And the others, not so enthusiastic, because we're forgetting the basic needs. And you know that the wealth gap is real. So most of America's wealth is at the hands of 1% of Americans. So that 1% is going to be fine, regardless of who wins in November. They really are going to be okay. It's the 99.9% that are not going to be okay. And we need to tell them how and why they're not going to be okay. So that's my biggest fear. So I feel that I need to come up with something positive since obviously this is very, very pessimistic. But I do fear that if we don't do anything, and especially the Democrats, especially at the top of the ticket, if they don't engage with voters, I fear that we're facing a calamity of tsunami proportions. I really do. And I don't want to think about how is that going to look like for me, for my daughter, even for you, for everyone else. So the positive message here is that as a columnist, the way that I coped with the negative messages, the hundreds and thousands sometimes, it was just to ignore them. You know, at some point, and I think I'm already running out of time, at some point in the anti-immigrant Russell Pierce of the world, I got a lot of job offers elsewhere, like, you really need to get the hell out of Arizona. And I began thinking, yeah, I need to do that. And finally, I decided, no, I'm actually going to stay because people here don't like me. And maybe this is where I can make a difference. But coping with it was ignoring the negativity, the racism, the beaner emails, the wetback, like you swam across the river, all that stuff. Now I can't. I'm in charge, right? I actually have to reply to emails. But this is a positive thing. I run every single day. I randomly picked the nastiest emails and called them. And every single time, their tone immediately changes. Like, oh, you actually call me. Like, one, I was not expecting that. Like, well, I really I didn't mean to call you beaner. You know, that kind of stuff. So that's a sign. That's a positive sign. So maybe if we engage more, maybe, just maybe, things will change. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Elvia. I might have to send a nasty email so I can get a phone call from you. All right. Some of you may recognize our next speaker's voice from the radio. He is the host of the Mike Broomhead Show on KTAR News. Please help us welcome Mike Broomhead.
Hey, thank you. Thanks for having me here. Maybe a little bit of the other side and how things are. I'm probably the most conservative person here in the room after hearing people speak, but that doesn't mean I don't enjoy and the company of other people. It's very interesting what Heather alluded to. I'm going to tell you a couple of stories, and I'm going to talk about civil debate. We in talk radio have earned our reputation as being uncivil. There's no doubt about that. You throw raw meat to the lions. That's the reputation we've earned over the years. But I do it a bit differently. I look at things as not right and left. I look at them as right and wrong. I've disagreed with my party. I met Heather with the Medicaid expansion thing that was going on when Governor Brewer was in office. And the governor's office reached out to me, and I was at a very conservative station at the time, and they explained to me what their three choices were, and this is the choice we've made. And I said, I'm on board. And they said, really? And they said, would you MC the, was it what, the coming out party? What do you want to call it? At the Capitol. And I remember, I remember going to that event and walking past protesters that were my close friends. Remember the cartoon with the sheepdog and the wolf that would drive together to work and punch in, and then they would go fight each other all day? That was what happened. I was actually hugging people that were booing me 15 minutes later. And I thought, maybe I'm in the right place because I'm making choices that I think are right and not necessarily right. Does that make sense? That it wasn't right. So this isn't about bashing one side or the other. It's interesting that this morning it was announced by the Citizens Clean Election Commission that I have been chosen to be the moderator if there is a debate between Katie Hobbs and Kari Lake. And if not, if Katie Hobbs decides not to show up, then I will do the one-on-one with Kari Lake. And Twitter went crazy, which I enjoy. Listen, I can take a joke. My last name really is Broomhead. You can't take a joke at my age after that. So it's funny because I look at what people are saying and I laugh about it. And some of it was really funny and I know it's not funny to be treated by racists. I'm not diminishing what happened, but these people hate me. And I laughed at what they said. I'm just going to share one with you that was very funny to me because I like clever. Funny is funny even if it's directed at you. And somebody said they asked Broomhead because Steve Bannon and Alex Jones weren't available. And I thought, man, that's really clever. But I want to tell you a story of seriousness for a moment. I have been involved in so many charitable organizations. The reason why I got into radio is that one of my younger brothers was killed in Iraq on Memorial Day of 2003. So my message was one of love and respect of my brother in the military. And that led to this crazy career that I'm in. But along the way, I found out that there are so many people in need and so many organizations that are doing wonderful things. And I was reached out to by an organization called Circle the City. And I don't know if you're familiar with them, but they fill the medical needs of homeless people. And they do amazing work, and I didn't know anything about them. And I was asked by their PR director, her name is Marty Hames, I was asked by Marty to come and tour their facility, and I did. And I was moved to tears. They have a respite center where people can come in and get treatment for illnesses. These are people on the street, and they can stay there and get chemotherapy so that you're not, could you imagine how bad and how rough chemo and radiation therapy are? But imagine getting that treatment and then going back onto the streets. And this is a place where they can stay and receive treatment and be treated like patients. And it made me cry, but it made me cry for a reason. My cousin, my older cousin Kenny and I were very, very close. All of our cousins were close when we were very young kids. And in high school, my aunt, his mother, passed away, and Kenny went off the rails, drugs and alcohol. And as a 17 or 18-year-old, he went off the rails and became homeless. And Kenny spent the rest of his adult life homeless. And he ended up in Vegas with his sister. And every time I would travel to see my cousins, we would go find Kenny, and I would hang out with him. We'd go to lunch, and we'd hang out. And he looked homeless. But to me, I just saw my cousin. I just saw Kenny. And so when I saw what Circle the City was doing, I was all in with both feet. And I don't normally talk about the charitable things I do, but I work with St. Vincent de Paul and St. Mary's Food Bank and the United Food Bank, and hunger means a lot to me. I was raised by a single mother. There were 3 of us, and we were hungry at times. So I've never done anything because I have so much to give. I do things because I know what it's like to have nothing. And recently I reached out, and I don't think anybody at the organization at Circle the City knows how much this hurt my feelings. But there is a wonderful woman named Sister Adele who started Circle the City. She did it 10 years ago. In 10 years, she has expanded this huge organization that helps so many homeless people. And after speaking at the 10th anniversary and hearing her tell her story, I reached out and said, I would love to have Sister Adele on the show. And I would love to talk to her about her story. And they said, she's really concerned about your political differences. Will you give her the questions in advance? And I thought, I was at the 10th anniversary and looked her in the face and told her how much I admired her. What does my politics have to do with this? I would never engage my politics in a conversation about fixing and solving the problem of homelessness. And it bothered me to think that because I'm politically on the right, that somehow I don't have a heart, that I don't have the ability to love and to care about people in need. I've spent my entire adult life saying, I'll do anything that I can to help people. And I realized that we are so politically divided in this country that we've earned our reputations of who we are, that if you're on the right side of the aisle, they assume that you don't care about social issues. And I really hope to change that. I really do. I will tell you that political discourse for me is interesting because my job is to give my opinion. I go on the air, and I'm supposed to take the news of the day, the actual journalists at AZ Central or the Arizona Republic. I take those stories, and we have a great news department at KTAR that does wonderful things, and I take those things and give my opinion on them. And if you listen to me, many of you would disagree with me and throw things at the radio. But what I would hope would happen was you would realize that here's the funny thing. I'm going to out you right now, Stephen. I was on the campaign trail with Stephen Richer, the county recorder, before he was elected. We were in people's backyards, and we were at events for places, and he was supportive of the Trump campaign. Don't kill him, but yell at him when he gets up here. But what I'm saying is he has maintained that. Clint Hickman at the County Board of Supervisors, a very conservative. So from my political point of view, our people, you know what I mean? Our tribe. These were people that were just like all of us. Call somebody wrong. I've got no problem with that. I have no problem with being called wrong. I've been married twice. I've been called wrong a lot. But what I can't stand is when someone attacks someone's character. That's the difference. When you say, and what I did, I went after the audit. I'm the Republican that on the radio of all places that went on the air and said, hey, wait a minute. This is way too partisan. This is way too one-sided. Nobody's going to believe a word you say. And I got crushed, which is okay because my job is to give my opinion. But when you go after a guy like Clint Hickman, and go look what the Hickman family has done for charitable organizations as a business in Arizona. Stephen Richer has done a job where he stood up and said, listen, I've looked at everything, I've seen everything, and there was nothing here to see. Call him wrong if you want to, disagree with him. But when you go after their character and you say they're in on the conspiracy, that's where I disagree. And whether it's people on the left or it's people on the right, we can disagree without being disagreeable. We can do things where I can say to you, I think you're completely wrong. Here's where I stand on the issue. Whether it's the issue of being pro-choice or pro-life, or gun control, or pro-Second Amendment, all of these issues that are so controversial, when we have one-on-one conversations, your comment about reaching out to people that email you, I think that's a wonderful idea, because when you talk to somebody face-to-face, it's easy to say horrible things to me when you're Slappy687 on Twitter. When you're an anonymous person on Twitter, it's easy. We call them keyboard warriors. But the difference is when you sit here face-to-face with me, we have an opportunity to disagree but respect each other. And when we can do that, it's the best atmosphere that there is. It truly is in my mind. If you listen to my show for 5 minutes, you're going to know exactly where I stand politically. I didn't write any of this, by the way. I'm not clever enough. But they say it's strong values, strong opinions. And I think, I don't know about the values so much. but I do have strong opinions. We can debate and disagree as we always should. We are going to pick sides. We are going to vote for people that we believe in or that we believe in more than the other option. But we all have to come together as Americans. The last story I'll share with you that framed this in my mind, it is etched in my mind, was in the days after 9/11. It took a tragedy like 9/11 to bring the country together. The President of the United States at the time, George W. Bush, gave a speech in the halls of Congress where he said that we will rally the world to our cause. We will not tire, we will not falter, we will not fail. And every member of the Congress stood up and cheered and applauded. And at the end of all of that, the entire U.S. Congress, Republicans and Democrats, stood on the steps of the United States Capitol and they sang, "God Bless America." And I thought, that is an amazing thing to see. Why does it take a tragedy to bring us together? Because in the end, we're all in it together. Whoever wins these 5 statewide races, or the 6th if you consider the Senate race to send whoever the next senator is going to be to D.C., we are all going to either benefit or suffer together with the decision we have collectively made. And why wouldn't we stand together and say, I disagree with you, but we are on the same team in the end? Humanity, we suffer together, we laugh together, we sit together, we drink beer together, which is my favorite part of tonight. But I would say to you that listen to my show. If you get an opportunity, I'm on 8 to noon on KTAR, that's 92.3 FM. And especially if you disagree with me, I would love to hear from you. I reach out to the people that disagree with me. I retweet and respond to tweets of people that disagree with me more than I do with people that agree with me. Because A, I want to know why you believe what you believe, and B, I'm never going to change your mind. But I want you to learn maybe to respect that where I come from is from an honest place. There is something that anybody that's ever gone to seminary, which I haven't, that learns, there's a class called apologetics. And it's not just stating what you believe, but it's defending why you believe it. And until you can defend what you believe, you don't know why you believe it. I want to know why you believe what you believe, and I want you to at least respect that I'm coming from a good place. I've been in Arizona almost 28 years. I love it. It's home for me. I just want people to respect, even if you completely disagree, that I'm coming from a good place. You got to have thick skin. You got to have a sense of humor. You got to do all these things in order to have civil debate. But at the same time, you have to give somebody the same respect in their opinion that you would want for your opinion. If we all had a conversation, there's a lot of you here that would dismiss 99% of what I believe politically. But I would hope you wouldn't dismiss me as a person. And I would hope you wouldn't walk away thinking I've dismissed you as a person. So I came here to talk about civility and dialogue because I'm the one that's paid to give my opinion every day. And sometimes I love the horrible things people say. I know it's a twisted way to look at things, but I love it. Twitter is my favorite place because nobody's nice on Twitter. I like the sarcasm. When you're mean, if it's funny, I don't care. But in reality, face to face, do we have mutual respect? Last thing I will say as an example of that. I grew up in Southwest Florida. Fort Myers, where the hurricane hit, my hometown. One of my best friends, he was my first friend. His name is Seth. He was my first friend in my neighborhood. And we grew up together. We rode the school bus together. We went middle school, high school, lifelong friends. Seth is the most liberal person I know. And we laugh because everybody on Twitter or on Facebook loves us or hates us depending on we laugh behind the scenes at it. Because every time a conversation happens, I picture him. When my brother was killed, Seth traveled across the state and was one of the first people to be at my brother's memorial service. We are still very close friends. And so here's a great story about Seth, just to tell you our political differences. Seth one time stated on Facebook, "I'm a moderate." And I said, "Oh my gosh, are you out of your mind? You are not even close to being a moderate." So he sent me a private picture, and it was him with his wife at the Pride Parade in Fort Lauderdale, standing with two drag queens, wearing a MoveOn.org t-shirt. And the caption said, "See, I told you I'm a moderate." And I laughed, and I said, "That's the coolest thing I've ever seen." And what I love about Seth is he knows who he is, he loves who he is, he stands by what he believes in, but he loves me like a brother. He doesn't judge my political leanings and the people I vote for on who I am in my heart. And when I see Seth, I see everybody else in the world and say, you know what, I'm not right. I'm just different. I don't have the corner on correct. I don't have the corner on patriotism. All I have is my opinion, and I want you to believe I'm doing the best I can. And when I fail, I hope you'll accept my apology. And when I'm right, I hope you'll admit it. If we can do that together, it's the best we're ever gonna be. Just wait for the Hells Angels to go by. So I'm gonna close with this. I hope I haven't gone too far over my time. I'm gonna close with this and saying that being paid to give my opinion has been one of the greatest honors of my life, that they've trusted me to know that I'm not gonna get the license pried off the wall. But what I focus on now as I get older is legacy. And the legacy I wanna leave behind is starting a conversation, especially with people where we disagree. When we disagree within our own party, like the mayor and Heather and I have dealt with, we may disagree with each other on many things. Stephen and I may disagree at times, but we're all trying to get through this together. And if I can bring a softer edge, which isn't my nature, but if I can bring a different opinion to talk radio so that isn't raw meat to the wolves, maybe that's the best I can do. So I want to say to the people that this organization, Arizona Talks, I want to thank them, because bringing me here had to be a challenge. But at the same time, it's opened the door to talk to so many of you. And I hope as the night goes on, we'll have a chance to speak with each other and truly have that conversation we're all hoping for, which is we can disagree and disagree in a good way. So I know that there's Stephen's coming up here in a minute, and that's a treat. I'll tell you that for sure. And I want to say thank you, and I hope you all have a good night.
Thank you, Mike. All right, to close out the evening, we are excited to bring back for a second time our next speaker. A little bit of inside information. He worked his public speaking chops by limelighting as a stand-up comic while putting himself through a little-known but upcoming school. Please welcome Maricopa County Recorder, Stephen Richer.
What? I'm going to have to figure that one out. All right, the Cardinals are winning 35-17. Yeah, this is the first game I haven't watched, so naturally they're playing well, seemingly, which about sums up my Arizona sports experience. All right, I'm going to play a game, and it's a clever game called Two Truths and a Lie? Two Truths and a Lie? Is that a game? All right, there's a Two Truths and a Dare. All right, two truths and a lie, except for there's going to be more truths, but there's just going to be one lie. All right, I was, give me a little break. It's been a busy day. We have something going on. All right, one, we're going to start easy. I was the lawfully elected, hopefully, Maricopa County Recorder as of the 2020 election. All right. Mike Broomhead is a state treasure, and you should all listen to KTAR every single morning. All right, no input on that one? The Arizona Republic is the paper of record, and even though the digital subscription is now like $18, you should subscribe. All right. We have an election coming up on November 8th. All right. You can vote by mail. You can drop your ballot off at a voting location, or you can vote in person. Okay. If you're going to mail back your ballot, you should mail it back by November 1st. Okay. Elections are run by a multi-partisan effort that involves Republicans, one of whom is represented tonight, Democrats, one of whom is represented tonight, independents, and libertarians working together. Sure. Okay. My wife, I met in law school on the way back from the 1L Halloween party. She was sitting at an open seat. She was waiting for somebody. I decided I would force myself down, talk to her. She is infinitely smarter than I am, infinitely better attorney. Yes, very true. Thank you. Infinitely better attorney, and has stuck with me through this wild ride of being Maricopa County Recorder. True. The internet is wrong, and I am not balding. All right, so there's the false one, but the rest were definitely true. Oh, and one more truth. You should definitely go to Mesa. Mesa downtown is sort of popping now, all right? Yeah. So I've been talking a lot about democracy lately, mostly in the context of our elections, which really, if you have any questions about, we're here to help. I work with 150 full-time employees who really love the process, who really care about this process, and we want to answer questions. We want to resolve doubts. We want to answer your fears, and so please let us know if you have any questions. That staff swells to 3,000 employees, 3,000 temporary workers for the general election. Like I said, there are R's, there are D's, there are I's, there are L's, all working together. We'd love to have you for a future election. If you have any questions about the process, it's the best way to learn about the process. Come work it, come be part of it. But I've been talking about democracy, and there's so much interest in Maricopa County, so much interest. And why is everyone so obsessed with Maricopa County? Well, they're obsessed with Maricopa County because of a few reasons. One, our voter registration. We just had close of books for the election. Voter registration closed 28 days before the election. If you haven't registered at this point, you can participate in future elections, but unfortunately you can't participate in this one. We're 34% Republican, 34% Independent, 31% Democrat, and whatever my math missed there, give to the Libertarians. We're the second largest voting jurisdiction in the United States. We have 2.4 million registered voters. We are only smaller than Los Angeles County. But Los Angeles County doesn't look exactly like 34%, 34%, 31%. So Maricopa County is dynamic. And we're a dynamic county in a state that is dynamic. Maricopa County makes up 62% of the voting population of the state of Arizona. 62%. That's very unusual. In fact, that's true of no other county and no other state. And we're an exciting state. And I hope that you embrace a little bit of that incitement. Most of the times you might be infuriated while you're watching the Arizona Cardinals or you're watching now the Phoenix Suns and you're like, oh my gosh, another political commercial. Like seriously, I could tell you, I could repeat some of those commercials verbatim. But I hope you embrace that because we are really at the center of the democratic universe here in Arizona. And we could determine who controls the United States Senate. We could determine who controls the United States House. We could determine who's the president in 2024. And most importantly, we could determine who's the next Maricopa County Recorder. So, as the infinitely wise Spider-Man once said, with great power comes great responsibility. So use it wisely. But in that important position, we have received tons and tons and tons of media requests. And the ones I like the most are the ones like KTAR, the local news media, because we want to explain the nuts and bolts of the process. We want to make you feel better about the process. But over the last 2 weeks, we have received 40 international media requests. I'm proud that I can identify every single country that has made that request. I cannot place them all on a map. But they all want to know. They want to know, where's American democracy going? And when they ask where American democracy is going, they're looking at Maricopa County. Well, why do they care about American democracy? If you look at events like the Arab Spring, if you look at the women's protest in Iran, and if you look at what's going on in Ukraine, those are distinct, disparate people who have distinct, unique battles that they're fighting for. But what's one unifying thing between those three different populations? They all have the American flag out there. They have the American flag. They're not Americans, but they have the American flag. Because the United States has been, and though imperfect, remains the beacon of democracy. We remain the beacon of democracy. We are the oldest democracy. We're the strongest democracy. We're the biggest democracy. And that's an important legacy. And it's a legacy that doesn't just come by default. It's not just humans create society and they immediately become democracies. And it's a default, it's a setting that doesn't come without certain norms, without certain institutions. So I want to tell you about just a few of them that I worry are under attack. The first is the free flow of ideas and the cauldron of debate. And no place used to embody that more than universities. Lindsay and I were lucky enough to meet at University of Chicago Law School, where I said many stupid things. But I learned. And nobody silenced me. Nobody ran me out of class. Nobody told me that I was a terrible human being. But they pointed out their ideas. They embarrassed me a little bit. I can think of a few teachers that embarrassed me. And I learned. And I think that civic institution, that cauldron of intellectual discipline, has gone soft. And it's been questioned. So that's one. The second is our judicial system and the criminal justice system. That is a critical institution, though flawed, that is absolutely necessary to the vitality and the vibrancy of this country. And yet, now, if a judge makes a decision you don't like, maybe go to his home. You send him death threats. If a magistrate judge for, say, a federal district court in the state of Florida issues a warrant, even if it's judicially proper, you go to his home. You try to kill him. If a jury verdict comes out and you don't like it, you even try to track down the jurors and you try and scare them. That's another institution that is under attack, and that's scary. Third institution, the peaceful transition of power. We are going to have an election here in Arizona. There is going to be a winner. Might not be who you vote for. I vote for a lot of losers who aren't losers but do lose. We have to accept that. We have to be able to move on. We have to be able to say we're going to get better with our ideas. We're going to have to point that out. And we have to endure. And we have to peacefully transition. And I think that January 6th remains one of the greatest black eyes on this country for hopefully another 200, 300, 400, 500, 600 years, and may it still be one of the biggest black eyes and maybe that we ever have. And the last point is the point that Mike pointed out, is that I increasingly see us put political values ahead of American values. People who were secretly, but sometimes not so secretly, saying, well, COVID might derail the Trump economy, and therefore Trump might lose. Are you kidding me? Hundreds of thousands of people are dying. Well, inflation and gas prices might be okay, and I'm sort of rooting for them because it might help Republicans in the midterm elections, and it might undermine the Biden administration. Are you kidding me? That leads to people not going on vacations, yes, but it leads to the things that Mike was talking about. People not even being able to eat. People not even being able to go to their jobs. And so I think we need to get back to what Mike was talking about, being Americans first. And I hope that we don't have to have something like 9/11 to happen again to rally us all to where we can all say, no matter who wins the election and who loses the election, but whoever wins the election, you know what? I might not have voted for you, but Godspeed, because I want what's good for Arizona, I want what's good for the United States, and I want this experiment in democracy to continue. So thanks very much.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, all of the speakers. Can we give another round of applause to every single speaker that came up here? It takes courage. It takes a character. Thank you so much to all. And I want to thank you all for sticking around. I mean, we're over an hour on the program, and we're still wanting more. So we're going to stick around. There's going to be more beer flowing. And one last thing I'll say is this is what Arizona Talks is all about. It's about bringing people that are making change, that are making these decisions, that are writing about it, speaking about it, and putting it all together so that we as Americans can make the best choice. So if you care about Arizona Talks, if you like what you saw today, please donate to us. It's arizonatalks.org. There's going to be way more events coming up next year as well as the end of the year. And you can become a member for only $25. So anyways, thank you so much. And let's drink. Let's hang out. Thank you. If you're a speaker, come up here. We're just going to take a speaker photo before you leave.